Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name's Halima, and I am a volunteer for the Everyday Muslim Project. Myself and Omer will be delivering this presentation together. So, to start off with, I think it's been a wonderful day of really incredible contributions to British Muslim heritage. I think the stark contrast between the previous contributions and us is the fact that our project is effectively a living history project. So as was mentioned, we have been going since 2014 trying to create the first dedicated archive to British Muslim heritage in the UK. The first archive project, called We Weren't Expecting to Stay and Other Stories, is created in partnership with Bishopsgate Institute and is an oral history project which documents almost 40 oral histories of British South Asian Muslims from 1940 to the present day in London. It includes the development of a physical and online exhibition, a website, education resources based on the national curriculum, all of which are available on the Everyday Muslim Project website. Some of you have already had the pleasure of looking at our booklet already. I only have 2 more left, whoever wants to grab those at the end of the presentation. So why do we need Everyday Muslim Archive that's sort of mapping contemporary histories? We are conscious that we need to, I think everyone's been talking about the absence of Muslims in British history today. What we are conscious about is the history of our parents and our grandparents, which we are interacting with in one sense, but which might be lost if we don't capture it at the moment. So the project very much responded to the need to capture these histories before these generations pass away. We want to educate and empower the Muslim community in the importance of creating tangible connections between their Muslim heritage and the representation of their identity in wider society. And finally, we want to advocate a sense of belonging of British-born and immigrant Muslim generations. So I think the other big contrast between previous contributions today and us is the way in which everything we do, we try to make as widely accessible as possible, even more so that we are actually generating it from the bottom up. So the whole point of the project is to engage with a large and diverse audience with the purpose to promoting the understanding and awareness and learning about the everyday aspects of Muslim lives. And to introduce Muslim heritage in the context of wider British history, particularly in the classroom, which I'll explain later. Excuse me. The purpose of this paper is to, I guess I've mentioned, highlight the gaps in the archives, but to expand and add depth to what has been contributed to today already. Very much so our initial research started with the contributions that we've had today. So we've read Professor Ansari's contributions, for example, and these are the sorts of things that we started with, and it's effectively what we're trying to update. To provide and rebalance an often narrow and politicized narrative that I think a lot of us have come across, which excludes the voice of the particularly in archives, which is what comes through in some of our examples later, the educated migrant and women, which has come up before today as well. There's a specific difference in our methodology in that we're using oral history to add more personal and more detailed accounts of individuals within the community to introduce the lived Muslim experience. And to support the construction of personal identities of future generations of the community. To situate the Everyday Muslim Archive academically a little bit, I'm going to refer to public history discourse, specifically quoting Raphael Samuel and Alessandro Portelli. So public history, as we are understanding it within the context of the archive, is the process of transmitting historical knowledge to wider audiences. I think traditionally there's a demarcation between the public and the historian, and we're trying to shift that a little bit. The historian traditionally is seen as the initiator, the interpreter, and the disseminator of the history. public history or community history, as we are attempting here, is as a practice moves away from this and emphasizes the agency of individuals like us in creating, recording, and interpreting their history, and encouraging a participatory historical culture. Raphael Samuel, for example, highlighted the commonality between the public person and the historian in that they are both invested in the historical study of our identity. He states, history is an organic form of knowledge, and one whose sources are history is an organic form of knowledge and one whose sources are promiscuous, drawing not only on real life experience but also on memory, myth, fantasy, and desire. The other methodology that I mentioned is the use of oral history. So recording the live histories of people who are still living. So Alessandro Portelli, who I've cited, emphasizes, for example, the importance of local and personal experiences. The use of oral history and testimony allows us, both the historian and the subject, to participate in history making. Portelli states, one with a story to tell and the other with a history to reconstruct. The use of personal testimony counteracts constructions of history. In this case, we are adding nuance to the post-Second World War migration, complicating existing narratives. The next step would be to have within the national narrative the long history of Muslims of Britain, which we've been discussing today. So we were conscious that this is a huge project, and we were very open-minded in what themes we wanted to reflect within the interviews. Word of mouth introductions to interviewees was our main way of getting in touch with people. The assumption was that our findings would reflect the prevailing narrative of non-skilled migrants coming over to the UK in the post-World War period and filling up labour shortages. And we were expecting that interviews would reflect that they were, in the most instances, low-skilled labourers and living in a certain lifestyle. I think these are the sorts of things that we've heard quite a lot from, for example, our parents or our grandparents. So as I mentioned before, we have always tried to make our research available to wider audiences. Our main way of doing that was doing an exhibition called We Weren't Expecting to Stay at the Vestry House Museum and at the Bishopsgate Institute in London. So this was incredible in trying to sort of map that history in the exhibition space in institutions that wouldn't have otherwise had that history at all. So before I begin, before I give you a taste of what the archive is, we would like to outline a few limitations. So when we set out to design and deliver the Everyday Muslim project, it was never intended that this would capture the lives, histories, and memory of the whole Muslim community within the first iteration of the project. However, it was a very intentional decision to start with the South Asian community. This is because the majority of the scarce existing archives relating to British Muslim heritage is mostly relating to a specific South Asian community at the moment. And it was expected that the collected oral histories would reflect this existing narrative. In that respect, I will outline the rest of the paper. So I guess it's become quite obvious that this isn't an academic exploration of Muslim migration, rather an insight into the lived experiences of Muslim migrants. The archive used in this paper currently documents South Asian migration, specifically to the London area. Any reference, therefore, in Muslim in this context will mostly be in reference to South Asian terminology. I think terminology was something that we grappled with quite a lot, that shift between South Asian or Black Muslim to just, South Asian or African or community history labels to Muslim. This is something that we hope to address in future projects, for example, projects into specifically looking at the Afro-Caribbean Muslim community and exploring the diversity of Black British Muslim heritage. So for the purposes of the paper, we will focus on the so-called first generation as well, and Omer here will show you some of the oral histories that we've collected.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, good afternoon. Well, I'm Omer Faruk Yeni. I'm also volunteering for the Everyday Muslim Initiative for some time. And today I'm basically going to be talking about the methodology and content of the interviews conducted by Everyday Muslim Initiative, including different themes from childhood to education, from faith to job experiences. And I'm going to try to give you a few examples of South Asian Muslim migrant figures. The interviewees were mainly selected on the basis that they migrated from South Asia in the post-war period or were born in the UK to South Asian migrants to London. We purposely didn't place any other stipulations in order to get a wide range of stories as possible. We interviewed almost 40 people, both from first and second generation. The oral history interview questions were structured around the following themes. Firstly, identity. When we mean identity, we try to ask the questions around the conceptions, qualities, beliefs, and expressions in their personal lives and in the society in large, to be able to explore the realities of living as a minority in a non-Muslim country, and also gender relations, transmission of cultural and religious values. The following theme was childhood, family, and education. It covers school life, games and sports, learning in the home and family life. In this category, we have asked the interviewees a few questions like how was their childhood, what type of games they used to play with their friends and siblings, and family life and family structure of the South Asian Muslim migrants mentioned in these interviews. What type of family background they're coming from, how did they meet with their husbands and wives. And coming to the topic of education, what was their qualifications, skills and background, what did they study, what type of courses they had, and learning opportunities and difficulties in general at home and in social environment as well. Another thing was working life, getting a job, working life here and back home experiences, practicing in a non-Muslim workplace. Employment patterns of South Asian Muslim migrants is another theme. First job experiences of the first generation in the UK was quite interesting. How did they get a job? What type of jobs they had? Their work conditions and opportunities and problems they have faced. As I mentioned, practicing as a Muslim in a non-Muslim workplace, whether they used to find a facility to pray or not. Another topic was culture and celebrations. So we were exploring how was the celebration patterns. For instance, Ramadan reflections and celebrations among the family members and neighbors. What sort of food they used to eat and share with their families, friends and neighbors in the UK. Faith and worship. In this subject, we try to raise a few questions like What was the place of faith in their upbringing? Did they find any difficulty while they were practicing their religion? What was the accessibility to halal food, for example? It was another interesting question. We also talk about their pilgrimage experiences to the Holy Lands as well. Migration is one of the common subjects that is mentioned quite a lot. In that subject, we try to ask what made them decide to come to the UK. What was their primary motivations? How did they prepare themselves for this journey? And we talk about their first impressions of the UK, to this country, to these people, to this culture, when they first arrived, and how they were treated in daily life. The overall purpose of using the themes is to try and capture whole everyday life experiences that will provide unique and valuable information for researchers, academics, and through classroom resources, exhibitions, social media, and wider community audience. Although time constraints, some gaps in memory are just two reasons why this may not always be possible. There were some themes we weren't expecting from our interviews, as they differ from the prevailing narrative, although it is important to note these examples were from mainly interviewees from middle-class families. The education, the degree to which migrants were a professional and educated class, an element which is chronically absent from the overall societal narrative of diasporic migrant community history, something we feel we will uncover more of as we undertake more interviews. While the majority of people interviewed did come to the UK to fulfill the post-World War labor shortage and subsequently worked in factories, at least initially, we also found that in some cases the reasons for coming to the UK were more diverse than just responding to unskilled labor shortages. People came to pursue further education, and even qualified migrants came to the UK to fill professional roles such as doctors, engineers, and journalists. One such example figure was Ghulam Haidar, who after completing his master's degree here in England at Imperial College London at the age of 23 in 1957, returned to Pakistan and was then sought out by a British company to work as a civil engineer for building harbors, docks, bridges, and big-scale civil engineering projects in the UK. Ghulam's first-time experience in London is truly short of unique. Ghulam Haidar speaks of his first 10 days in London when he first arrived to London. So let's have a look what he tells in his words. It is important to know some interviewees from middle-class families also ended up doing menial jobs. There was this perception that by coming to England they could better themselves, but they didn't realize the conditions they would end up living in, for example, or that despite qualifications they wouldn't necessarily get the sort of jobs they would have expected. Others spoke of racism in the workplace as another reason for not getting the jobs they were qualified for. The story of women is generally scarce within the standard narrative. We know most were either uneducated or had basic GCSE level education. They were also usually married to men who had come here previously, and that most of them were housewives. Later, some worked in factories and others worked for factories from their own home, often piecemeal seamstress work. Yet we were surprised to learn about the women's own educational levels were very high, many of them with masters before they came to the UK. 16 women were interviewed in total, out of which 8 were first-generation migrants. Out of these 8 women, the majority had at least a secondary education, 4 had at least a university degree. Najma Mirza held a degree in biology and once she came to England worked in a laboratory. Sabia Siddiqui, we are gonna listen her in a second, was one of these women born in Hyderabad in 1942. She grew up in Karachi from the age of 6. She gained a combined Masters of Science plus Education in Home Economics and Teaching from the American College in Karachi. Well, actually, we had some other examples, but unfortunately out of time limit. So I'm now handing over to Halima. Thank you.
So very quickly, just to mention again and quickly conclude that there were many stories that we literally were not able to document because of time, and such as the first Muslim female mayor of Walthamstow in the 80s, the first Muslim woman to train as a nurse in the 1930s, and another which we are really excited about is the story of the Muslim physician of Prince Albert. These are but a tiny fraction of lived experiences that, if collected on a larger scale, can begin to construct a more comprehensive account of Muslims' presence and contribution to Britain, which is sadly lacking in older documented histories at the moment. Finally, before I leave you, I just want to mention that we are still in the midst of collecting, documenting, but also consulting the Muslim community as widely as possible as part of our What Matters consultation. So instead of going on about it, I will direct you to the website. Please do check it out. This is our attempt to make sure that what's being documented is as reflective of the community as possible. Thank you.